Hello everyone, it's Michael Barron. I'm back for night 3 of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat here at Lyric Theater, and I am with today's special pre-show guest, Father Tim Sean Youmans.
Hey everybody.
Yeah, and he's the chaplain at Casady School, among other things. And we're about to have a great conversation about Joseph, so come on, let's go.
Come on, let's go this way.
Anna.
Hi, Mom. Mom just got live. Hi, everybody. Hi, Mom. Agustas. And this is April, the band, the crew. Hi, everyone.
And I think we're ready.
And here we go.
Well set. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage producing artistic director and Thunder fan Michael Barron. And I'm bringing onto the stage with me Father Tim Sean Youmans, who's the chaplain at Casady School. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to introduce Father Youmans really quickly. Father Tim Sean Youmans serves as the vicar of St. Edward the Confessor Chapel and chair of the religion department at Casady School. He serves the cathedral as canon for youth and families, bringing experience, joy, and creativity to our communities. A native of Wyoming, Father Tim Sean is married to Dr. Carrie Youmans, who is the honors director and associate professor of English at Oklahoma State University. Tim Sean came into the Episcopal Church after 20 years as a Baptist youth pastor. He earned his degree in English and history from Oklahoma Baptist University in 1991.
A long time ago.
You're only a year older than me. And a Master's of Divinity at Southwestern Baptist in 1994. He is the author of Blessed to Bless, an introduction to the Bible, a survey of the scriptures geared toward teenagers and the biblically uninitiated. Tim Sean is a folk musician and songwriter and teacher at the banjo. Tim Sean and Karen have a son, Noah, who was actually an actor here on their stage when he was a teenager. In Newsies, directed by Ashley Wells. And currently, he is in New York starring in
Saw, the horror movie. It's Saw musical. I know that sounds made up, but he's in it.
Is it on Broadway?
It is off
Off.
Nice. We are off.
I will tell you, as a parent of an actor, you can be sure that we are patrons of the arts. You get it? Yeah.
That's true.
We send him money every month.
He's a patriot of his art.
Patron of his art.
Just so you know, my father gave me money probably until I was 29.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
hang in there.
I think that's the unspoken deal.
It is.
30.
But it pays off in the end. We hope. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about this production of Joseph and the initiative that brought Father Youmans with us. So, I think I mentioned I'm Michael Barron, the director of the show. And how many of you have seen Joseph before? Quite a few.
This production or just see?
There's some parents in the audience today. But I know if you've seen it before, you might have seen the Donny Osmond version, which I kindly refer to as the Las Vegas version. It was very flashy, and it brought a lot of attention to this musical that was written in 1968. It was the first musical written by Angelique Weber and Tim Rice, who went on to later to collaborate doing Evita, Jesus Christ Superstar, amongst others. And it was written as a 23-minute cantata for an Episcopal boys' school. For the Episcopal boys' private boys' school at the church. A few years later, they made a concept album, which is about 40 minutes long, and if you see, it's 1969. You can hear it on YouTube, it sounds like the Beatles. And there's a little bit of Jesus Christ Superstar in it. And then after that, there was a pop album kind of created for it in the early 70s, which sounds more like the show you saw today. It's been done all over the world, particularly because it's a biblical story simply told with really wonderful tunes and a really big heart. How these talks started was this fall. I'm Jewish and belong to Temple B'nai Israel. It's the one on Penn Avenue. And during High Holidays, which is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for us, this And so my rabbi, Rabbi Harris, she said, I've been talking with Pastor Jared Chambers at Crossings Mayfair, a new Crossings affiliate near our temple, and they've kindly agreed to allow us to use their church for our high holidays. Well, it turned out to be a really wonderful collaboration, and I then had breakfast with both of them and said, listen, next summer I'm going to teach Joseph. I now teach Sunday school at the temple, little fourth graders, but I did not want to teach Sunday school to the cast and kids of the show, and particularly because there's a lot of faith traditions that are represented on stage, as well as atheists. So, I asked them, what do you think of the idea of me reaching out to faith leaders and scholars around town to get their points of view on the story of Joseph? And could you share yours? They did share theirs. It was an awesome conversation, and that led me down an awesome rabbit hole to talk to Dr. Ashansi, who is the Muslim leader of the city, Catholic priests. I talked to, of course, Crossings. Last night was Kyle Anderson, Pastor Anderson from Church of the Servant, with Rabbi Abby Jacobson, who's the head of another temple. But anyway, it's been really interesting. And a couple facts before I get to you, that this is all I know, is one, because I know that with adult actors, the story has a lot of male leads, and I have a ton of women playing wives on stage, and I really wanted them to have more stake in the story. And so I went online to find the name of the wives of the brothers. Does anyone know the names of the wives of the brothers? Of course you don't, because they don't really exist. However, online I found the names of the wives. So I went to Dr. Wolf, who's the guest speaker tomorrow night, and her specialty is in the Bible, and said, I found the name of the wives online. And she said, no, you didn't. Send that link to me. So I sent her the link, and sent her down a rabbit hole.
She does like to sort of check nonsense.
It was nonsense.
Yeah.
But it turns out the names I found were from the Book of Jubilees.
Yeah.
Which is what?
A book outside of the collection that got included as canon.
Yes.
Canon means the books that were decided at the Northern level that they could be considered scripture. And then there's books that people value and cherish, but for a variety of reasons didn't make the cut.
Yes.
And the Book of Jubilees.
Yes, it's online with the Jews and Christians like this is not from the Bible.
Yes.
The other, I think, interesting thing I found out was not only is Joseph in all three major monotheistic religions, but in the Muslim faith, it's the only story in the Quran that is told in chronological order. All the rest is told out of time based on how Muhammad was relating it. So here we are, though, with you, Father. How do you teach this story to 11-year-olds?
Yeah, so I was telling Michael, at our school, we have in our junior high, which for our school is 5th through 8th grade, so 10 years old, 13, 14. And one of the, I guess you could call it hazing almost, but every student is required to go through it's a survey of the Bible. They don't read every jot and tittle, but they really cover more of the Bible than most people do, even churchy folks, over 4 years. And the story of Joseph and his travails is covered for 5th graders, which is like 10, maybe 11 years old, depending on the year.
Are all of your students Episcopal or Christian? Oh,
that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked, because we're an Episcopal school, but the Episcopal Church isn't huge. It is historically influential, but it isn't big. And so we're about 8% Episcopal, our student body. And so we have Christians, Christian families of every flavor. A big Orthodox population of students, we have a lot of students at Crossings, and a few Baptists, a lot of Catholic students. Then we also are really enriched because we have a lot of Muslim families who are very much interested in the rigorous education that Casady has. And then we also have a pretty large population of Hindu students. Great academic minds, these kids. And then, of course, there's also families, a few Jewish families at Casady, not as many as we would like to have at Casady School. But then there's also a pretty good selection of families who they're ambivalent. You know, they're just sort of unsure about religion. Families don't really attend, but their kids participate in our chapels and in our class. So 5th grade, that sort of mix of students, all the religions, and as you say, those who aren't, you know,
Figuring it out.
yeah, maybe not, kind of an attitude. They encounter this story in 5th grade. It's the final, they read just the book of Genesis in 5th grade.
When you get to Joseph, do you open the Bible and start reading? How do you get them even interested in, the Bible and two, this story?
So even for this smattering of people who are in the room, there may be some of you who have spent some legitimate time reading the Bible. If you have, you know that this is not a child-friendly book. It is in places, but definitely churches over the centuries, what they've done with biblical stories is this is a fancy word, curated the story, made it more child-friendly. Like, for instance, Samson, right? He's presented as this superhero, with superhuman strength. But if you actually read that story, he's a mess. He has a gambling addiction. He has other addictions that I won't say because we're on Instagram. But there's a theme that tends to run through these stories, is that God is interested in using even very flawed people. And so the book of Genesis, even the story of Joseph, has a couple turns that, deal with some pretty sensitive, hard issues. But not in this musical. It's curated.
It's curated to a certain point, and in fact, if you can actually watch the Donny Osmond version online. I would say it's PG-13.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of shocked at some of the imagery, and even though that was it was big popular because as it toured the country, children's choirs were allowed on stage and they sang along with the show. But there's a few key scenes that I felt children should not sing. So when you watch our production, you will see lots of kids involved, but a few times I have gently escorted them off stage, particularly when we deal with money and seduction.
Earmuffs.
Yeah. And when you see the scene of seduction, there's sort of a cloth with a big eye, and initially the staging had that sort of in front of all the kids on stage, but it just wasn't enough. So I said, you know what, let's actually have them take a break for a minute while we talk about this.
Yeah, it's that scene with Potiphar's wife.
Yes.
So the way that we present the story is at the end of their trimester, they're finishing up the book of Genesis. Joseph is the final capstone story in the book of Genesis. Joseph becomes the bridge between the Genesis stories of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and it's the bridge into the Exodus story. Obviously, the Exodus story is about being in Egypt. And so when Joseph is in Egypt and his family is there, they are celebrating. Like, Joseph is our guy. And so, bring your family down here. We'll set them up in Goshen. It'll be amazing. But then, as the book says early on in the book of Genesis, a Pharaoh came to power who did not know Joseph, which I think is an ancient Hebrew way of saying a Pharaoh came to power who didn't care how awesome Joseph was, and that they were eventually enslaved. So the way we finish it, we present the story, is Steven Spielberg. You know him? Yeah. DreamWorks, his company, he made an animated film called Joseph, Prince of Dreams. And so the kids watch that film as a way, it's kind of a treat for the end of their hard work. But it also, that film is really good about moving carefully around difficult issues. Like the seduction of Potiphar's wife, so that some of the kids know what's going on, and some of them were just so sweet and innocent. They don't know what's happening.
And I never heard of this film until I talked to my father, because a lot of you might know Prince of Egypt, which was very popular on the main screen in the music spice, Stephen Schwartz, who did Wicked. And it's a really beautiful animated film about the story of Exodus and Moses. what DreamWorks at one point were going to make a series of Prince of Egypt. The next one they did was Prince of Dreams and went straight to video, which usually the quality of those is not so good, but this is actually quite a beautiful movie, and the music is good.
It's really good.
It is.
Now, what the kids do say when they break out into song in the film, and mostly it's the boys, like, oh no, music. You know, so this is a really good song. So, hang in there, hang in there.
Well, they'll be groaning a lot with tonight, because the whole thing is sung through. When dealing with Joseph and the brothers and the lessons that the story might teach or talks about, is there specific things you'd like to talk about with the students at different ages, and then maybe even you personally as an adult? How do you feel the brothers treat him? Is it warranted? Where does the code come into play? Is it just his code they're jealous of, or is it, does this happen before?
So this is what my hope is for students. And, I'm the kind of teacher when they're watching a film, I don't just, sit in the back and sip on a cookie. I'm the guy that stops the film and says, okay, what you're seeing here, and this is what's happening here, let me tell you a little bit about this. And so the thing where I really stop and sort of try to have a moment with them. Because what we say in education, we're trying to create durable learning. Because kids will learn things for a test, and then they'll just dump it. And so there's things that do stick. It's called sticky learning, durable learning, sticky learning. The thing I want them with the story of Joseph is the idea that here's this really talented, charismatic, dynamic, smart kid. And a lot of students at Casady are just like him. And there's high hopes for who he will be and what he will do. And there's a scene in the movie where he's been thrown into prison. And, he's been sold into slavery by, spoiler alert, thrown into slavery, sold into slavery by his brothers. And even then, he sort of seems to recover from it. Right? He's rising up in influence and power and position as a slave. And then that collapses. And he's in jail, he's in prison again. And there's a beautiful song that was written for this movie. But the thing I want to stop with them and talk about is this idea, and I don't use this phrase with them, but the phrase for me is extenuate circumstances. And that's a fancy way of saying, how do you see around corners? Because often we're in situations that we did not plan for, that we are not excited about, that are not going the way that we think they should be going. But there's a possibility that God is going to use those circumstances to do something amazing. And I do think that there's sort of a spiritual element to it, that if we're willing to say, how can I flourish even in this situation that seems painful and difficult? If I'll be open to it, then God will be present with you in prison and can do things that your imagination is not allowed to embrace. So that's the big sort of heart thing that I want them to get from the story. Is when you think things are going badly, yes they are, but maybe there's a chance that that's taking you down the road that you needed to go down, that God needed you to go down, but you weren't going to do it willingly.
So as we've gone through rehearsal, and for those of you just joining us, this is Father Youmans, who's the chaplain at Casady School. And each night we're having conversations with scholars from Oklahoma. And during rehearsal, though, I have wondered that Joseph is an interpreter of dreams. It's considered a gift. Do people have that gift now? Or does he just hear what someone is saying in a problem and giving them really good advice? Because the Pharaoh says, I dreamed, about cows, and then from that he says, you might consider rationing your food if there's a famine, which to me is just good advice. But the Pharaoh had never actually had listened to anyone else before.
Right. Michael, as I was thinking about talking with you in front of these fine people, I was thinking about, dreams. That's the thing that we can talk about. And even though this is not the setting for me to get feedback from you, this is a legit question I want you to think about. Do you have vivid dreams? Because not everybody does, right? Are you a dreamer? Not in the romantic thinking big sense, but going to sleep.
I think it depends on what I'm eating.
Oh.
If I've had a big steak dinner, I'm not dreaming.
Poor bed.
Depends on if the show rehearsals are going well or not. I often am falling in an elevator. Often, I'm like, oh no. But what I do find, I dream about a situation that is worse than my own life, and I wake up and go, oh, thank goodness that isn't true. You know what that means?
So you know how you have a dream, you wake up, and you remember the dream immediately, but then 3 minutes later.
Yep.
Yeah. So some of the spiritual directors I've had in my life, and I've given this advice, is you keep a journal by your bed, and when you wake up, before you go to the necessary room, write down your dream, and then come back and look at it. A friend of mine talks about, he studied psychology, compensatory dreams. They're dreams where you're working stuff out. And so one of the big questions that we ask in our class that relates to this dream in the music and the story is the Bible is just lousy. I shouldn't use that word. The Bible is replete with this language of God speaking. And God said, and God said, and God said. And I sometimes bring up with the students, man, God was chatting back then, right? And the question that I raised for them, and I really pushed them on this, is what do you think is actually happening when somebody is reporting that God is speaking to them? Is it an audible voice that's floating in the air that vibrates off the ear, right? Just to speak physiologically. Is it a thought that is just so persistent that you're thinking, this isn't my thinking, this is a different kind of thinking, this is God getting me to think this way? And then dreams, that comes up because there are pockets in the Bible where dreams of God speaking to people. And of course that always takes us down rabbit holes with students, because people have weird dreams and they want to tell the weird dreams. I've had weird dreams, but I'm on Instagram, so I'm not going to say the word.
Well, we did Sound of Music 2 seasons ago. I don't know if you saw the Sound of Music, but we had a chorus of 50 nuns, in quotes. They're community singers that were nuns, and I wanted to take that moment seriously. And so I met with Sister Veronica Higgins, who passed away this year. She's a wonderful woman, wonderful nun, Carmelite nun. And when I met with her at the Family Life Center in Okarchi, where she was the caretaker for a large group of disabled adults, and often they're the only person caring about them. And she told me her calling story, and I've never had someone say to me, she became a nun because she was in Chattanooga in college. She walked by the cathedral. There was a cross outside, and Jesus said to her, at that moment, you need to help those that can't help themselves.
Yes.
And
probably a prominent God.
Huge. And as a Jew, who the idea of Jesus is not even a part of our religion, I did not question her faith at all, that moment happened for her. And up until her death, we were friends, and she would check in on me, and I would check in on her, because even though we had different faiths, I think we were both seeking the same solace and understanding of a greater being.
How are we doing?
I know
Michelle.
it's almost time.
Yeah, do closing remarks.
I do. I
Good.
have to say, this was going to be my big opener. There's something happening connected with Oklahoma City tonight.
Something.
Other than my shirt,
And the fact that you are all here, some of you are probably because your children are in this play, in this musical. But I was thinking that my opener would be, there's been a lot of discussion in the sports world that this finals is not interesting. Have you heard that?
boo.
Small market teams, Indianapolis, Oklahoma City. And so they say, the viewership is down and all that because it drives us crazy as Oklahoma City folks. And but I think that's really sort of a window into this musical, this story. Because there's a concept in biblical stories called primogeniture reversal. How about that? Primogeniture is when, in their culture, there was a certain order of power and position and inheritance in a family. And so if you were firstborn, that was a sweet spot. And then it was from there down. And one of the themes that shows up in the story of Joseph is the topsy, the sort of disordering of the primogeniture model. And you find this all throughout the scriptures. Joseph's grandfather, father and grandfather also discussed. So, just like we're saying in basketball right now, there's a mixing up of power and prestige and order. Go Thunder! That spiritual lesson is very prominent in the story of Joseph. He's not supposed to be the beloved child, but he rises to that position.
Thank you very much for your thoughts and sharing your time with us.
Did you guys buy it? You buy that?
Father Youmans. We're going to start the show right at 7:30. One last sports thing. Do you know who the first person in the Bible was to play tennis? It was Joseph, because he served in Pharaoh's courts. Thank you. We'll see you soon.